The final tab in the text inspector is the layout tab. And we're going to use this when we build projects. I'm not going to walk through it too much in here. We'll use it in very specific ways. The only thing I want to show you here is there's something called the layout method, which is set to type by default. There's also a layout method called paragraph. And if I select it, everything kind of shifts over. It's not really clear what it does. But what it allows you to do is if you have a lot of text that you want to fit within a certain block, it does that for you. But there's actually a better way to select it. And what I mean is I'm going to turn this text off to hide it for a minute and deselect it. I'm going to select the text tool. If I click and I type a lot, and I'm just going to type a lot, it just keeps going, going, going. It's going way off the screen. In fact, if I hit escape and command space, drag left, you can see it just keeps going forever. Okay, Shift C to fit that back, delete. If you want a bunch of text to fit within a prescribed area, what you can do when you select the text tool, instead of clicking, is to click drag. And that creates a box for your text. So now, if I click in that and type, all my text will conform to that box. So if you have a big block of text that you have that you want to conform, this is a great way to do it, because then you can very easily adjust it and the text will flow with it. So I don't frequently use large blocks of text when I'm doing motion graphics and text animation, but sometimes you need to describe something. You have a disclaimer, you have some words that need to have a certain length, or lower third sometimes. This is really useful because if you create a block of text, and let's call this, I'll just put my name here as if motion instructor, okay? So this is a little lower third. What's nice about this is what I'm going to do is go to the View menu and I'm going to turn on Safe Zones. Safe Zones will show you Title Safe and Action Safe. The inner blue line is Title Safe. The outer blue line is Action Safe. So I can line this thing up with the inner blue line, and this is becoming a little less required, but generally for a TV, you're going to want your text to stay within this line. By doing this, check this out. Because I've created a paragraph, see where it says layout method paragraph, it knows that because I did a click drag. If I go back to the format and change the alignment to right, it immediately jumps over to the right-hand side. You have to do this on a line-by-line basis, but it will automatically correctly align the text. This is really great when you're creating titles, lower thirds for Final Cut Pro 10, and you want the Final Cut Pro editor to very quickly be able to jump something all the way to the left or the right. In fact, if you open that motion title project, if you hit Command N, just to remind you, this Final Cut title project, when we open that up, this default text, check it out. I'll go to the inspector, to text, to layout, it's paragraph. So if I double click on it, you'll see it's got these same controls here. And if I press the apostrophe key, let me actually escape to get out of the text there, press the apostrophe key, which is the shortcut for Action Safe and Title Safe, the safe zones, you'll see it's lined up exactly that way. So very useful thing to have there, useful thing to know about. So I wanted to bring that up. But the rest of, let's go ahead and delete this and turn our text back on. The rest of the layout parameters, we're going to go into more detail in building projects. Okay, so really just one more thing I want to mention in terms of formatting and styling text before we get into text animation. And this is a special tool called the Adjust Glyph tool. And the way you get to it, if we click the little pop-up for the different tools available, you'll see it says Transform Glyph down here. Now this menu here is context sensitive. For instance, if I selected the gradient, I'm not going to get that. It's not selectable. Okay, I get this other Adjust Item tool, which allows us to adjust the gradient. But when I select the text, I get to select this Transform Glyph. Now check this out. It selects the first letter by default, but I can click on any letter. What's so great about this tool, it allows you to, everything we've done so far, position, style, rotation, drop shadow, glows, color, slanting, all that stuff can be done to individual letters, or if I hold the Shift key down, multiple letters at the same time. So this is actually a way you could kern text, because once you select it, these arrows here, there's a red arrow pointing horizontally, green pointing up, and there's a blue arrow pointing right at us. So you can use these to drag whatever's selected. Let me undo and just make sure we have one selected. Drag left or right, undo. Drag up or down, undo. Or I'm actually dragging in Z space now. It's flying forward or away in Z space by dragging on the blue arrow. There are also rotation bands. That's what these little circles are here. So I can rotate this letter around the x-axis, around the y-axis, or around the z-axis. So you can have some real fun with how you set up your text. For example, I can scale this. I'm going to click a corner. I'm going to hold down the Shift key so that it scales proportionally, so I don't make it too fat or skinny. And I'm holding the Option key down so it scales around its anchor point. Its anchor point is right where those arrows are there. So I can make that nice and big and then position it, kind of exactly where I want. So I can change its position, rotation, and scale directly in the canvas. But everything else applies. If I go to the Style section or the Style pane of the text inspector, I can change the color of just that one letter. Let's make it maybe a lighter blue like that. I could change in the Format section the font of just that one letter. I could add an outline just to that one letter. So I'll add an outline. Let's make it black and make it wider. Okay. And the cool thing about this, you could have always, of course, always created a separate text layer that had these applied, but because this S is part of the same text object, I'm going to hit Shift S to get back to my regular tool. Not only does it travel with it, when we animate this layer of text, it will animate as part of the whole thing. One other thing I want to do here is let's just change the line spacing to move things back up. And in fact, let's do this. With the Adjust Glyph tool, Transform Glyph tool, I'm going to select this, Shift select all these, and move them all down more like that. Okay, Shift S, move everything back up. So super powerful tool to have the ability to manipulate text on a glyph by glyph basis in any way to create any styling. One caveat is that once you've done that, if you try to change the entire block of text, you can run into some issues. So for instance, now this font is multiple fonts. So if you try to change the font here, it's going to do some weird stuff. It's not necessarily going to do what you expect. Let's see if we can undo that. So it can get a little bit tricky after creating that, but the Adjust Glyph tool is a very powerful tool. So that's really the basics I wanted to get you familiar with, getting comfortable with creating, formatting, and styling text. From here, we're going to jump into some different ways to animate text.